for the introduction there, David. Glad to be here. So as most of you know, I guess I'm Jim Baird, and I'm talking about my solo winter crossing of the northern Ungava Peninsula. Definitely a great warm-up trip to go on alone. It's proved to be quite the year. Anyway, so first of all, I start with Peninsula crater. It's always interested me. I kind of knew it was there, and for one thing, it's beautiful. For one thing, it's in the. I will. I'll try my best. For one thing, it's in the far-flung reaches of the Ungava Peninsula, which is Arctic Quebec. You know, way up there, and we're talking about the Eastern Arctic here. The Eastern Arctic is a lot more harsh than the Western Arctic. The Western Arctic, there's actually trees north of the Arctic Circle. For example, on Great Bear Lake, you cross the Arctic Circle before you cross the tree line when you're traveling north. And but here, the Eastern Arctic, like for example, Kuujjuaq, which is at the bottom of Ungava Bay, is basically the extent of the trees, and Inuvik is still south of the Arctic Circle, so it's very harsh. Part of that has to do with the elevation, and pretty much in the middle of the northern Ungava Peninsula is this 1.4 million year old crater, and it was created by a meteor that slammed into the Earth's crust, disintegrated on impact. And just to give you an idea, it's 400 meters deep. This is my shot here. It's a panorama shot of it. It's 400 meters deep. So if you could imagine, that is 57 meters less than the height of the CN Tower. And the lake in the bottom of it is 867 feet deep, which makes it one of the deepest lakes in North America. There's also fish in the lake, but there's no inflow or outflow, and there's stunted fish because it's some of the purest water in the world. There's very little nutrients in the water, and so obviously at one time it was connected with surrounding rivers and lakes, but the rim was held down by incredible weight of glaciers, and as the glaciers melted, that rim rebounded back up, and it sticks up 550 feet above the surrounding plateau. So actually, right there where I'm standing is the highest point on the entire Ungava Peninsula. It's over 2,500 feet in elevation, which is cool. Anyway, so it's also a scientific, about the water. Each drop of water in it is on average 350 years old, and it's some of the purest water in the world. So it's a scientific research spot that's actually globally significant. Because there's no inflow or outflow, the sediments at the bottom, way down there at the bottom of this crater, have fossilized pollens, and they're undisturbed. So scientists will go and they'll recover those, and they'll use them to look way back into the Earth's distant climactic past. So I thought that was pretty cool. So I also just wanted to see the crater, but I wanted to do an Arctic trip. I wanted to go to the Ungava Peninsula, and I thought, a winter trip, let's do it all in one. So at first I was thinking, well, maybe I just go to the crater and back, but then I'm looking at the map, and I'm like, well, I'm already a third of the way there. Might as well just keep giving her. And so, basically, so I kind of looked for some other people who wanted to come with me. For some reason, nobody did. So it was a solo trip. Buck, he didn't have a choice, but he was in. He was built for this, right? So actually, so my research actually told me that I was going to be the first person on record to actually do this. The thing's not working. Oh, wait a minute, maybe I'm doing, it's upside down. I'm not a very technologically savvy dude here. So that gives you an idea. So my research told me I'd be the first person to do a self-propelled trip across the northern Ungava Peninsula. The last person to do it was Robert Flaherty in 1903, and he did it further south by the route through the Payne and Leaf rivers. So, that kind of made me feel cool. Probably just because nobody else, or why would anyone do it? So I just found something that nobody would ever want to do, and I did that so I could say I'm the first. For what it's worth. Anyway, so that I thought that was kind of cool. So the crater is actually, you can see there, it's in a Quebec park. And the closest community is Kangik-Sujuak, which is formerly known as Wakem Bay. And you can access it, so Wakem Bay, Kangik-Sujuak, which you can see right on the far left of this map, that's way off the road system. Even to fly to Kuujjuaq at the very southern end of Ungava Bay from Montreal costs twice as much than to fly from Montreal to Sydney, Australia. And you're not on an organized road system, you're way north of the tree line. But there is actually at great expense. So it's about 120K from Kangik-Sujuak to the Pigwalo crater. And Quebec Parks at great expense put a cabin every 30 kilometers or so. And I guess if you're faster than me and you're not hauling a month's worth of gear or whatever, you can stay at a cabin every night. So I kind of thought, okay, maybe I'd be able to stay one every 2 or 3 days. Of course, I'm going to be hauling about a month's worth of gear, which is heavy, and I'm going to be going up 2,000-foot mountains while hauling that. So I think every 30 kilometers a day was a little much. So anyways, I arrived in a Dash 8, box crated in the cargo hall. We stop in every little community on the Ungava Bay and Hudson Strait. And finally we get out, there's the Dash 8 and Air Inuit. And they fly in some pretty windy conditions. Like it gets a little sketchy. And so I get to town, that's what I see when I get off the airport. And I get to town, I start walking around town, and a guy rolls up in a skidoo and he's like, "Are you Jim?" I'm like, "Yeah, I guess who the hell else would be this 6'5" ginger rolling around out of nowhere, The Vikings haven't been in Ungava for years, right?" So I go, "Yeah." Anyways, he said, "I don't know." It turns out he's the park warden, and he shakes my hand, but he's kind of looking at me like this, And I know he's just trying to kind of judge whether I'm crazy or not. So I go like, "What would you give me 1 out of 10 on the crazy scale?" And he says, "An 11. Okay, you just have to get that off his chest. So then I walk over to the northern store, which is just basically, your everyday grocery store kind of thing in town. And I get talking with another guy, and I tell him what I'm doing. And his eyes widen, and he just looks at me, he's like, "Don't do it! You'll freeze to death!" Like, just genuinely terrified for me. And of course, this was making me also feel more terrified than I already was. Because I was already terrified, clearly, because I was about to do this whole thing. So I kind of just brushed it off, right? I'm not going to back out now. But what Noah did tell me, he said the last person to try to do this, he did it so to get a dog, he even had skis, I didn't have skis. So the last person that came to do this, we had to evacuate them on day 3. They hit bad weather, they got mixed up, they got lost, and he punched a PLB, and we had to go find him and bring him out on day 3. And I'm like, day 3, I'm going to make it more than day 3, right? Like, come on, right? So I thought, ding, ding, ding. Anyways, so one thing that's super cool as I was in town, now the communities on Hudson Strait are the only place in the world where human beings venture under the sea ice at low tide to collect food. And this is something that has a lot of dangers that go with it. Because if the water comes in, the tide comes in while you're under there, it'll pinch the hole you chisel, you can get trapped and have a probably very unpleasant death. At least you'll have some mussels to eat while you're dying. So that's what they collect in here, mussels. And so I couldn't find anyone who was doing it, so I ended up walking out there in hopes that I would find somebody, and sure enough, this guy Lucasi came over, and who turned out to be the exact same guy I'd seen on the BBC documentary. And Constantine goes under the sea ice looking for mussels. I'm like, "You're the guy, wow!" So I had that exact experience I've seen on BBC. So we chisel a hole in the ice, and there's a bunch of other kind of students are on some sort of program with Inuit students from Nunavut. They kind of travel around a graduate student program. We chisel the ice, we all go under there, and we collect mussels. I know you're thinking, "Jim, you have enough mussels as it is, right?" But, sorry. But it was really cool. It was actually warm under there, and I actually got to see these ice channels with tidal pools that were snaking off in all these directions, and you just hear the water drip that's bloop, like, I I guess is that a good, I don't know, that's what it sounds to me. And they echo off, and most of the Inuit there, they still speak Inuktitut. So I'm under the ice, hearing these water driplets and the echo of words spoken in Inuktitut going through these caverns. It was amazing. I got videos and pictures of it, and of course got a whole bunch of mussels, which I gorged on when the day was over. Well, anyways, so, oh, there's me under the sea ice, giving a thumbs up there. So anyways, I got going, and of course I have to head into 2,000 foot mountains. So, I mean, the plateau is 2,000 feet, so I'm going up and down, and ultimately gaining 2,000 feet to get just to Peninsula crater. And my pulse are heavy, and you can imagine that it is freaking hard, okay? Like, you know, they say don't sweat. It's very difficult to not sweating enough. Buck was blowing it out there at this point. He wasn't really pulling. He had too much weight, so I had to kind of spot Buck. And it's really hard to get a perception of what this is like, how steep this is, but you know, everything's so white there. But it was tough going to get into the mountains. There are some of these stone cairns that sort of mark the path into Peninsula, so I was worried that I wouldn't be able to find it. Well, you know, I could actually kind of follow these every 100 meters or so when the visibility was good, and it was actually not too hard to navigate there. But so, at the end of day 2, okay, I'm making distance, and I'm pushing hard. I'm trying to get to one of these cabins, but I can't. So I'm working up more of a sweat than I could, and the weather just goes to crap. Okay, it starts ripping wind, you know, howling 80 kilometer an hour wind, 100 kilometer an hour gusts. You know, we're talking about. I mean. minus 50 and minus 60 with the wind chill. And I'm trying to get my tent up, and I can't do it. I'm repetitively trying to keep blowing down, and so I have to struggle, and I have to build this snow block wall to block the wind, because that's a must there. You got to build the snow block wall to block the wind, or you don't get your tent up behind it. Is that a guy had told me now, so I consulted this professional dog sled racer before I headed out and did this. And he gave me the jacket, he gave me dog clothes, he gave me some of the things. One of the things he said was, you know, Jim, you gotta be careful because your dog's penis, you know, it'll just freeze right up there. And I started laughing, and he's just deadpan, like, this isn't funny, you know? Anyways, so I couldn't believe that. He's telling me stories about his dog's penis is freezing. He's like, oh, it's just snapped off just like an icicle out there. Right on the side of the Yukon Trail, I'm trying to warm it in my hands, and I'm like, this is just ridiculous. So I'm sitting there, and I'm building this snowball wall. I built battery dead. Maybe he died at a good point. Someone's getting crazy. There we go. So I'm building this snow block wall, and I'm really thinking, you know, if I can't get this snow block wall built, and of course it's blowing down, and I'm thinking if I can't get this thing up, I might die. I look over, Buck's penis is starting to freeze. I'm sitting there in the howling blizzard holding my dog's penis in my hand on day 2, and I'm like, oh my God, it's really happening. You know, fortunately, it probably wasn't half as bad as the black flies do it. So, you know, like, so I get the freaking tent up, I climb inside the tent, and I grab Buck, I'm like, we're gonna live, Buck! And I didn't do a very good job of setting up, I'm going backwards again. I didn't do a very good job of setting up the tent. That's my Snow Trekker minimalist tent there. It hadn't really been used in extreme Arctic situations above the tree line like this. And so how I ended, thanks man, no problem. So how I ended up setting it up was I didn't extend the poles all the way. I extended it, but not the last piece, I guess, to the pole. I folded that under the tent, and then folded the tent around, and I found there's less area to heat. I used a double burner Coleman stove to heat it, and so there's less to heat and less area for the wind to pick up. And I set it up like this, and I just kept setting it up. You know, obviously not as crude as this, but I just kept setting it up a little bit lower, just being one person for the rest of the trip, and it worked out. Anyways, so I'll tell you what. The next day, it took a lot of guts to get up and get going again, and I started thinking, that's why this other guy bailed. You know what I mean? Like, this was the time where I felt like bailing more than ever. You know what I mean? And I just thought, well, how much worse is it going to get? You know, dog's dick freezing off, almost dying. It's like, you know, like, it can't be any worse than this. And so I kept going, you know, I just kept going. And these are these cabins. I mean, look at this, in the middle of nowhere. And amazing. So, and these things had, you know, really sturdy cabins, and these things have a stove in it. You know, obviously to get this stuff in here wasn't cheap. And so I had a place where I could kind of get warm. I had the place to myself. And, you know, warm up, dry my stuff out. One of the things I made sure that I did when I was out there is every night I'd set up my tent really well. I'd build the block. Usually the snow block hole was a must just to get the tent up. Once it was up, if the wind changed directions, it would withstand. But I made sure I really did a great job. I shoveled snow along that flat really deeply, big pieces of snow. And the snow's so hard packed there that if you just have a normal shovel, you can put it into the snow and it'll snap. That snow's so hard packed, and that's one of the reasons why, you know, I can tow more stuff, because you're kind of towing on top of the snow as opposed to, you know, places in the trees in Ontario and that, when you're really breaking that deep trail, it makes it a lot harder. So that's one of the reasons why people can do these Arctic expeditions with so much gear, because that snow is hard packed. And so I used the thick snow stakes, and I anchored them, and I really went all out every time, and did an extra special job setting my tent up, because if that horrible weather picks up in the middle of the night, you don't want to be, you know, you're going to die kind of thing. This is the kind of terrain I was going through here. You know, pretty intense. Where am I already? Yeah, so, there we go. So so basically, day 13, I get to the crater, which is, you know, I was planning on making it a little bit faster than that, but, you know, the mountains and all that, they weren't easy. And I'm sitting there at the crater, and all of a sudden, I hear a snowmobile. I'm like, am I going crazy? Like, I thought I had the place to myself. Well, it turns out it was that the park board and Noah and those younger kids that I had met and gone under the sea ice with. And I didn't know they were going to be there, so I bumped into them, and I ended up hanging out with these guys, and we built an igloo here out on the sea ice, which actually turned out to be our ice fishing hut. It was really cold. I actually got frostbite this night taking these pictures. And you can see just by how these two pics are kind of foggy, just how much warmer it was once we got into the igloo. And that was really cool. I actually got a really good kind of lesson to sit there and watch how they did it. It's not easy. And this is those guys smoking darts there on the left, and the northern lights. This is actually, we're actually looking due south here, but when you're that far north, the northern lights are just everywhere. And, you know, we got in there the next day, hammered a couple of fish. Buck ate both of these behind my back when I wasn't looking. Yeah. And so I got so the weather got really crappy and I couldn't travel. Well, I guess it was a kind of a good place to be hung up because I could hang out with these guys and eat their food instead of dipping into my supply. So we ate beluga whale muktuk, which is just the raw frozen skin of a beluga whale. We ate, that's just a big hunk of caribou there in the middle, frozen, and you just cut pieces off and eat it like chips. And I said, oh, we're gonna have some country food. Can I join you? And they said, yeah, go ahead. And I thought they were waiting for it to thaw up, but no, it was dinner was served. That was it. And so we just came up and we were cutting pieces off, and I'm eating this whale skin. And I noticed one beluga whale's white, so I noticed one is blue. So I'm like, oh, you know, is this a different, you know, species of whales? It's like a narwhal or something? Like, no, that one's a baby. And I'm just like, I mean, a baby beluga. What a roll, I guess. And actually, it was actually really good. It tastes like almost coconut. It's very hard to describe, but I thought it was tasty. And so this is what I ate with these guys for, you know, I think 2 or 3 days while I was hung up until, you know, the weather broke. And then I moved on, and I went north to the Pavunatuck River, which is a very long river. It's a traditional Inuit route. They used to use it from Hudson Bay to access the interior. And very beautiful canyons. I'd be walking walking along, and I look at the map and I realize I'm on top of what would be a class 3, and they, in the summer, it's just frozen solid, walking down waterfalls, just frozen solid. And things were, there's some drifts on there that were a challenge, but things were going, you can see that the kind of drifts here, like constant kind of bumps and that, but I was making some pretty decent time, I would have been. And my plan was to go follow the Pavungnatuck to Lac Alman, a big lake in the interior, and then beeline straight to Coolabit on Hudson Bay. But Mother Nature had different plans for me, and I ended up just getting hammered repetitively by blizzard after blizzard after blizzard. I remember being there in the middle of the night, and the tent's just shaking violently, and I built a snowblock wall, but the wind shifted, and I just see the thick poles of my snow tracker tent just bending and permanently bent from just the wind blowing on it. I almost put my boots on in the tent at night, because imagine the whole tent just blew right off, and I'd just be like, it would be game over probably, right? So it was pretty scary, but then I'd sit there and I'd stay up for an hour or two and be like, well, I haven't died yet. So probably not going to die, and then I go back to sleep. And it worked out fine. But there was a couple times, 2 days in a row, I couldn't travel, and it kind of got scary. And even one day, actually, we were in there that day after the tent was vibrating so violently, I had to dig myself out of the tent. So there's me and Buck, so we opened the door and it was just snow, and I literally had to dig myself right out. And the following day I still couldn't travel there. You can see it white out. It's not actually snowing, but you can't see anything, and there's just ripping 80-kilometer-an-hour winds. I got out to do a little ice fishing because I was really concerned, okay, I'm running out of food at this point. This is taking longer than I thought. We were having a bit of an early spring up there. And spring was trying to move in too quick, and those fronts were colliding. And so I was just getting hammered with weather. It's something I should have accounted for more. So my food supply is going down, down, down. So I figured, okay, I'm going to do some ice fishing this day. I couldn't travel. So first thing you do, build a snowblock wall. You can see just in building the wall, the drift that's forming around it. And I had a 2-piece ice pick, or ice chisel. They call it a top up there. In Inuktitut, that's called a top. And it was a 2-piece, and I had to chisel through 8 feet of ice after building this snowblock wall. And on the end, I'll go back, on the end I actually had this little scoop shovel installed on the top, and that way you can reach down and scoop the snow out as you dig, which is a must when you're digging through that much ice. So anyways, the long and short of it, I caught absolutely nothing. Which was really discouraging. You can imagine after being there, I'm running out of food, and I'm just going to be hammering fish. Am I going to eat a char? Am I going to eat a lake char? Maybe I'll eat both of them, who knows? Anyways, just nothing. It just turned out that it's so hard to decide where to make the hole, because it's hard to even tell where's land and where's not land. And the worst thing, and this has happened to me before, is you spend forever making a hole and it's right into rocks and it's frozen down 8 feet deep. So you got to come. So basically, what ended up happening is where my hole was, it was like 50 feet deep underneath the hole, and the fish at that time are usually in about 10 feet of water under the ice, which is where I was catching fish back at the crater. And then unfortunately, even though I tried twice, it was to no avail. But I got to drink some water, which was nice, I guess. I didn't have to melt snow that day. For my water, what I was doing is I was traveling, and I put it around a lanyard around my neck and just keep it inside. I know David was talking about the little kind of thermos pack or something like that. I didn't have one of those, but what I did with my other one is I keep my big, thick down parka out and on top of my toboggan as I travel. And I tuck it in there, and that would kind of act as an insulator. And then when I was done one, I'd switch it, and I'd sort of add little bits of snow to it throughout the day, just to kind of like, as I was drinking it, add a little snow, and it would kind of keep it, more topped. I had to melt everything with the stove. There's Buck stuck on a rock. See that? That was annoying. What ended up happening was, once I hit Lac Alman, and I kept hitting blizzards, And I got to Lac Elm, and the terrain got crazy rugged, like up and down, and huge boulders going around them, and just like, you know, nutty kind of stuff. And I was getting more and more concerned for time. And Buck was getting hung up, and I have to turn around and go back and get him in this rocky area. It was a real pain in the butt. And so I looked very closely at my food supply, and I said, okay, if I cut my breakfast and my dinners in half, and I up my pace to 20 kilometers a day, and I don't eat anything on the days where I can't travel, and I shortened my route to Hudson Bay by 20 kilometers, which I probably should have done from the beginning, I can make it. And that's what I did. But then what got in my way of this happening was that I hit spring. And all of a sudden, the snow gets soft. And I'm sinking into the snow up to my knee with every step, with my snowshoes on. And so you can imagine trying to make 20K in this is much more difficult. But I had to. So I kept going. And Buck got better and better at pulling the sled, if you can imagine, as I did as well. And as we got very, very close to the end, I was crossing these lakes, and my boots were filling with slush. This is a few days left. I'm really trying to push. So I facilitated my pickup with a sat taxing device, which we thankfully have nowadays. And I'm trying to push and push to get to the coast. It's coming at this point the next morning. I'm that close. And I come up a riverbank like this. And I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to make it. But then I look and I see this huge ridge, super steep, 250, 300 feet easily, deep snow, riddled with boulders, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm not going to be making it. I'm going to be dragging over boulder fields. At this point, the snow on the tops of all the mountains had melted right off. So on all the ridges, I'd just be literally dragging over boulders, going back, helping Buck drag over. I kept having to go back and get Buck unstuck, which was driving me crazy. And so I go up the ridge, and I'm doing switchbacks. This is why there's no pictures at this time, because it was a nightmare. And I'm doing switchbacks, and finally I'm almost at the top. I'm like, well, that's it. I'm going to have to be, dragging over boulders at night. I'm not going to make it. And so I start going back down to get Buck, because Buck's, way down there. And as I'm going down, I just see Buck's little freaking head pop up over the incline, and I couldn't believe it. He made it. He just dragged up this massive hill, over all the boulders. He followed my path where he could and just went beast mode, I guess. And I'm just like, yeah! Good boy! Unbelievable. I still can't believe he did it. Anyway, so that saved us a half an hour, and we pushed hard to get to Hudson Bay, and we got there before dark on day 36, and we did it. 36 days. This is me drying my boots out there, and one of the things that's not easy is going downhill. Going uphill is hard, but when your toboggan wants to whip past you full speed, and you got the dog, and dealing with that isn't tough. What I did is tough. What I did was I had a rope at the front of Buck's toboggan line. I had poles and a pulk, and I could kind of manage it. It was still a nightmare, but I take Buck's and I flip that rope over the front, and because the snow was pretty hard packed, that rope would dig into the snow, and it would just slow up the pulk enough that it wouldn't come crashing into his feet or rip down and spin him around backwards and hurt him and that like that. So that worked really well. Anyway, so this is a pano. It's very hard to tell, but these are 200-foot ridges there, and the kind of rugged terrain, and you can see the exposed rock. In some places, it was much more significant. And I woke up the next morning where I was expecting to wait for my pickup, and I looked around and I realized that this was a campsite that had been used for hundreds of years. I found stone tent rings. I found this meat cache. Look at how this is marked with a dark black rock that just pops right from the snow. And Inuit, this area is probably used for a couple hundred years by different groups of Inuit. And I thought that was really cool. I actually found Actually found an artifact there, and there was, now that the snow had melted, there was low brush Arctic cranberries there, and they freeze the plants the winter before the fall before that, and the best time to eat them is right after the snow melts. So that was great, because all the food I had left was a handful of protein powder at this point. So I was happy to just hammer these things. And actually, I really, more than ever before, I really felt like I had a connection, or at that point, like I really kind of understood more than a way I ever had before in my life, what it might have been like for these people that camped here in the past. And that was actually a really cool feeling. So that's me on Hudson Bay on the last day. Of course, it was wonderful weather at that point. My face was horribly sunburned and lips chapped and everything, but we ripped back to Akuvik. And that's the thriving metropolis of Ungava. The club scene there is unbelievable. Actually, a pretty neat little community there right on Hudson Bay. And actually, David Bain mentioned it. There was a story that I wrote for Explore about it. All the pictures are of Buck. There's like one of me, which it is what it is. And actually, when I wasn't expecting, but when I got home, I ended up working on a piece for the Discovery Channel in Canada for the show Daily Planet. And so I just want to show that right now, if I can figure out how to press play on this thing. Maybe you want to come spot me there, technical guy? Okay.
Bottom left there, top left, I think. Cursor back on it. There you go.
Oh yeah, that's it, that tiny little one there. No, that's not it. That's
There.
No, that's not it. That's the one that's there. Bang! Oh, do we have sound here, David?
We did.
Yes.
On Daily Planet, we're causing a disaster, so we learn how to make sure it never happens again. Join us for that and a whole lot more Tuesday.
Now, most adrenaline rushes last for what, a couple seconds, maybe a few minutes, but this next one just goes on and on and on. It is a month-long adrenaline-fueled struggle for survival.
I'm Baird, and right now is the beginning of my month-long 370-kilometer expedition to cross Nunavut on foot.
Jim plans to cross the northern Ungava Peninsula, starting in Kangaksujua, navigating rivers, lakes, a crater, and mountains all the way to Hudson Bay. Others have done the trek by canoe, snowmobile, and dog sled, but no one has ever walked it.
A lot of dangers out there, but the weather is going to be my biggest concern. And of course, I got my dog Buck, who's going to be helping me out along the way, and he's going to be my only companion because this is a solo trip.
With over 136 kilos of gear in tow, the two will face temperatures as low as -60 and wind speeds up to 100 kilometers an hour. But his challenge increases as they head deeper into the mountains, especially for his dog Buck.
I think it's just the snow, and it looks like it's snowing more. It's not hard packed anymore. I took some weight out of this toboggan, and it's not much heavier than it was yesterday. So I think maybe just the snow is making it harder for him. It's making it harder for me too. And I haven't even gone 5K, and it's already late in the afternoon.
To reach Hudson Bay, Jim must maintain 15 kilometers a day in order for his 30-day food supply to last. A difficult pace as he crosses rugged terrain and 600-meter mountains en route to Peninsula Crater.
It would appear that I have a ridiculous another hill to go up here, man.
But it's nothing compared to what's on the horizon.
There's supposed to be a blizzard coming, and it looks like it's blowing in right now. I could push on, but when it really starts blowing, I've worked up some sweat, and that's a good way to die.
Mother Nature makes a call.
This is crazy out here. This is where your skills that you've been practicing either work or they don't.
He builds a wall against the 100-kilometer-an-hour winds. Without it, he can't put up his tent. Without shelter, he will freeze to death.
One of the great things about this double burner, the thing throws off more heat. It's going to heat up my tent. I need to use it as a heat source or to dry clothes. Look at this. This whole thing from here
somehow have to dig myself out of here.
Digging is only half the battle. With relentless winds and very low visibility, Jim has to wait out the storm.
It's morning, day 10. It's time to make some breakfast and get the hell out of here. Got 25K to make it today, so I'm not looking forward to be honest with you, but it'll be nice to see the crater.
The Agawa crater is the Quebec Park and is at the 1/3 mark of Jim's journey.
It's definitely a sight to behold. And the crater was created by a massive meteor 1.5 million years ago and is about 400 meters deep.
That's about the height of the CN Tower.
It's day 16. I'm on the Peninsula River. Yesterday was nice and sunny and you can see all the hard-packed drifts. And today it's actually just dangerous. I can't see where I'm going with my sunglasses on or off. Right now I'm walking in a total whiteout. It's very, very hard to navigate. I can't see the horizon. I'm feeling kind of a little scared that I'm really wet and it's getting cold. So I'm a little nervous that this is going to be taking longer than I thought, but hopefully I'm wrong about that. It took me 13 or 14 days to reach Lac Alaman from the time I got to the Peninsula River because I was getting hammered by blizzard after blizzard. Buck is running low on food.
With little food left, Jim decides to chisel through 7 feet of ice to fish, but the fish aren't biting.
I was just thinking, what the hell do I do? I have to expend a lot of calories to make the hole and a lot of time to make the hole and then to actually fish. I don't think I'm going to be able to do 20K a day and finish this trip in 7 days. I just didn't bring enough food, I feel stupid.
With very few options, Jim decides to ration the remaining food for he and Buck.
Buck and I split 4 pieces of bacon, and that's all we're going to eat for today. I have about 75 or 80 kilometers left to get to the coast. I have 5K left to go, and I have 2 huge ridges to cross. And it's dark in 2 hours, and I have to make it today. The snow's melting fast and just dragging over rocks. I don't know if I'm gonna make it before dark, but I really gotta try. I gotta give it all I got here.
To avoid traveling at night and in an effort to save time, Jim gambles with a shorter but more dangerous route over boulders and rocks.
Come on, Buck!
The difficult path gets Buck stuck at the bottom of the ridge, pushing Jim to help him and do the trek twice.
I just don't even care anymore. Just the fastest way is best.
Unless he can get Buck quickly up the ridge, Jim now faces the reality of traveling over a dangerous boulder field in the dark, with hunger zapping his energy.
Oh my God, he did it! Come on, Buck! Can't believe he made it up that hill. Good boy! Good boy! And there it is, folks. Hudson Bay. I did it. I feel like relieved and also it's surreal. Oh, wow, what a trip. You really are a good dog. You walk across the Ungava Peninsula, didn't you?
So I think for a passing, that's pretty much it, but I wanted to kind of show you one more thing since I brought Buck out here and he absolutely did nothing to help out with my presentation. So Buck, what's this? What's that? What's that? What's that? Buck, what's this, Buck? What's this? What's that? What's There you go, good boy.
those Americans never stood a chance. Ladies and gentlemen, let's have another hand for Jim and all the others. Everybody, Buck? Yeah. Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, that brings us to the end of